Hello and welcome everybody to this special webinar event. Cloud cybersecurity is not only about prevention, it is about resilience. Today's exciting webinar is sponsored by Rubrik with special guests from Microsoft Azure and Geldwin and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Mackenzie Puddesy with Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this conversation today because more than ever before, organizations are indeed in need of a robust approach to cybersecurity in the cloud. With the evolving needs of the distributed workforce, the increase in tech adoption, new programs being used, and the need to communicate growing at an incredibly rapid pace, there's a lot to monitor and manage in order to be secure. Not only that, but with ransomware attacks becoming a household name and a common occurrence, your organization should be thinking beyond just prevention and also about recovery and overall resilience. How do you fortify yourself in an agile way to be minimally affected by a ransomware attack? Well, luckily, we have experts in the field to share exactly how to do that, how to make your worst day not so bad at all, hopefully. This is going to be such a cool conversation, and I cannot wait to get started. So let's zip through the housekeeping and get some things on our way. First, I want to draw your attention to the questions section of your webinar console. This is the best place to get involved, get interactive, and post all your insights, questions, comments, feedback, and ideas. We indeed do want to hear from you. So find that questions tab now, and let's start out by saying hi, hello, hola, aloha, bonjour, or whatever greeting resonates with you today, and give a little virtual wave to the community here with you. As a quick side note, that window is also the best place to reach out and let us know if you have any technical issues during the session. Knock on wood, of course, you don't. Don't forget that a browser refresh should get rid of the usual tech gremlins, but if not, just shoot a message in that questions tab and the ATM crew and I will be here to help. And the last thing I want to your audience console is the handouts tab. You can go check out some cool resources and follow-ups to our conversation today, which will be packed with great info. And if all that cool content wasn't enough of a sweet giveaway, we also have a $250 Amazon gift card as a prize drawing at the end of the webinar. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you're not sure what those are, you can also find those full T's and C's linked in the handouts tab today. Okay, with that, I believe we are finished with our housekeeping. I told you I would keep it short and sweet, and now we are ready to start our webinar. I'm so excited to introduce you all to Alka Tandon. She's the Senior Director of Cloud Product at Rubrik, and she has invited special guest Vamshi Komenini. He is the Group Product Manager of Microsoft Azure. He'll be joining first, followed by a discussion with Stephen Morris, who's the Senior Manager of IT, Architecture, and Engineering at Geldwin. I'm so excited to hear how these three are approaching cyber resilience in 2024 and beyond, and I know you have a lot of great info to discuss among you. So let's get things rolling. Alka, I think you're going to kick things off, so I'm going to hand it over to you. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alka Tandon, and I lead cloud and SaaS data protection here at Rubrik. I have the pleasure of being joined today by Vamshi Komeneni from Microsoft.
Hi, Alka. Glad to be here. I lead product management for object storage at Microsoft Azure.
So today we're going to be discussing what it means for enterprises to achieve cyber resilience in the cloud. A lot of our customers here at Rubrik are undergoing cloud transformations, and it's really a privilege for us to be able to play a role in that transformation. But there's a good amount of confusion about which paradigms hold and which need to be reevaluated for the cloud. That's certainly true of the approach to data protection. So I want to start today by talking about how cloud data protection is different from on-prem protection. Vamshi, what are you seeing?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Alka, because there is a bunch of fundamental differences. Let me touch on one, which is just about visibility of what to protect. On premises, you have IT professionals who manage these environments for decades and really kind of know how to do things, and they really understand what are the mission critical workloads, what are the sensitive data workloads, how do they protect them, how do they secure them, how do they restore them. The cloud has come along. It's, really improved agility and, ability to kind of build applications quickly and, deploy and scale quickly. But that has come with some challenges, namely, the visibility of these workloads. How do you know which workloads to protect? How do you know, where to recover them? How do you know about all the dependencies between the workloads, particularly in these cases where there's a lot of different business groups, running and managing their own CI/CD pipelines. So that, ends up having a lot of, dependencies where, developers have to go tag workloads, have to remember to keep those tags refreshed and up to date. And it leads to challenges for IT professionals who are trying to secure, their mission critical data and mission critical workloads and recover in the case of something like a disaster or a ransomware attack or something else.
I definitely agree with that. I think maybe one other thing I'd add is around security. So what we're seeing is that traditional security controls deployed to protect the data center have little application in a cloud world, forcing data and identity security into the center of considerations today. What we're seeing is that threat actors aren't breaking in anymore, they're actually logging in. And by that, I mean that they're gaining access via leaked or stolen credentials or system misconfigurations, moving laterally, elevating permissions, expanding their footprint, and then exfiltrating or destroying and encrypting the data. These threats can sit dormant for a while, and detection and remediation is quite difficult with the tools on the market today.
Yeah, absolutely. Security is a huge one, Alka. And, that's something that, our companies have worked together so much to improve and make that sort of a fundamental part of detection as much as recovery. So that's a great point. Another one that comes to mind is really all of the issues around cost and cost management and the trade-off between cost and RTO, RPO. In a traditional on-premises world, you go in, you go buy compute hardware, you buy your storage servers, you have a sort of CapEx cycle for those, and you really kind of design in resiliency and RPO and RTO from the beginning. With the cloud, you have a lot more scale and a lot more flexibility, but you also have to be very careful of that trade-off between RPO, RTO, and cost, because your cost goes up as you keep compute instances of storage copies and things like that. So it's a very careful trade-off that somebody moving to the cloud has to do, which is different from the set of trade-offs you have on premises. So Alka, going back to your point of security, though, one of the perspectives that both Rubrik and Microsoft share is how important it is for us to help our customers achieve cyber resilience and really doing as much as we can to prevent these attacks, these cyber events. Though it's inevitable, it seems like, given the landscape out there today, that most organizations will experience a cyber event or an attack and have the need to recover. So what is Rubrik's perspective on the critical capabilities that are needed to achieve cyber resilience in the cloud? Can you talk about, the work Rubrik has done, the work we've done together?
Sure. So to us, cyber resilience is two things. First, to your point, Vamshi, it's about prevention. So cyber posture. That means that organizations can answer questions like, what data do I have? Where does it live? Is it sensitive? Who has access to it? And are the people who have access to it doing something out of the ordinary with it? Being able to answer these questions at scale and continuously really allows organizations to identify and quantify risk, reduce the attack surface, and identify incidents before they become data breaches. So that's on the prevention side, but prevention isn't enough. Organizations really need to build a strategy around when an attack happens and how to recover. So along these lines, it really starts with immutable, air-gapped, access-controlled backups. You need to be able to monitor latent threats in your environment consistently. And then you need to be able to identify when a mass encryption or a deletion event occurs, pinpoint the clean point of recovery, and get back up and running. And then finally, recovery, being able to recover seamlessly in an automated way to get your business back up and running. So Rubrik's actually been building a whole host of cyber recovery capabilities, and recently we acquired a technology that we've been integrating into our cyber recovery platform to enable end-to-end data security management across the data estate for both IT and security teams. Vamshi, one of the areas we're starting to see demand for cyber resilience pick up is in unstructured data and object storage. As the head of product for Azure Storage, I'd love to get your take on what you're seeing in terms of how customers are using storage, the types of threats to this asset type, and the ways in which customers are securing it.
Yeah, that's a great question, Alka, and it's very near and dear to my heart. It's something that object storage has been on this fascinating journey with the kinds of workloads that customers have used it for over the last 10 to 15 years, that it's been ascendant as a type of fundamental storage along with block and file storage. So in the beginning, object storage was really something that you used for simple cloud native apps, storing some config data, things like that. And you used it for, backups, right? Or long-term archives, and really as a way of managing cost and an add-on to your file storage or maybe even your block storage. But what's happened in the last few years is, we have a whole host of new workloads. I'll talk a little bit about that. First, those, simple cloud native apps have become, very complex, interesting, and high scale cloud native apps where, organizations have really moved mission critical repositories of data into object storage, building on those applications that natively use object storage. So that's been a big change that we've seen. Second, as you know, with Rubrik and all of its usage of object storage, it's really become a place for your disaster recovery and business critical data, the ability to have recovery happen from there. Third, analytics and big data. So these pipelines of data that, unstructured data has really sort of become a huge mainstream element of companies analyzing their businesses, and really building on these data pipelines. And all of that data flows through object storage. You might get signals from sensors on a factory floor. You might get signals from a website that's, looking at user interaction with that web service and website. All of that data kind of comes in unstructured form, sits in object storage, and then is processed by a data transformation pipeline, then maybe a Databricks or some other form of data pipeline that takes that data, cleans it, preps it, and makes it aggregated to be ready for consumption in an analytics platform or a visualization platform like Power BI. So that's another workload. And lastly, even AI workloads have really started even in these early days leveraging object storage for its scale and performance throughput. So training of these foundational models by these large AI companies, that training run data is stored on object storage. Their checkpoints are stored on object storage. And customers that are then using those foundation models, like Azure for OpenAI as an example, provides the ability to customize, the OpenAI models, the OpenAI LLMs with your own custom data. Customers bring that data into object storage and then use it to feed these large language models and be able to build AI-enriched applications on top of that. So it's this really wide and rich gamut of use cases, over the time. Now, how do we secure these things? How do we think about threats for this data? Because it's far more critical data and far more actively used data. We've done a ton of work over the years to really provide fundamental platform capabilities to make this, data more secure. We've allowed for data immutability and data, locks on the data, so people can store compliance data or just make sure data is never tampered with. We've introduced a whole host of security features and security integrations, starting from authorization or authentication with Azure Entra ID, and all the way to delegated authorization, and just making sure we have really robust, secure ways of providing access to just the right scope of data and making sure those accesses are audited if needed. And lastly, with regards to networking, we've done a lot of work in terms of making sure there's the right amount of network isolation for this data. Some data needs to be public because it's a public web service, but lots of data in object storage now needs to be within the enterprise's data and security boundaries. And we've, radically added to the capabilities. You're talking about things like Azure Private Link that allows you to just turn off public access to your object storage accounts and just have it exist on your corporate network as part of an extension to that corporate network. So there's a lot of evolution in this space, a lot of interesting things. And I know Rubrik themselves use object storage, so I'd love to ask you what your experience with object storage is and how you're using it.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I wanted to actually add a couple of the ways in which Rubrik's solution is really deeply integrated with Azure to help our joint customers achieve cyber resilience. So the first capability I'll highlight is what we call Rubrik Cloud Vault, which is, a lot of comprehensive data protection strategies, cyber insurance policies, regulatory bodies require a secure, isolated data vault separated from the primary infrastructure. So what we did with Rubrik Cloud Vault, which is actually hosted on Azure, is create a fully managed service for cyber recovery, which offers a really predictable cost model with a single bill for all storage and egress costs. And that's been really highly adopted by many of our customers. I'm also really excited about Ruby, which is Rubrik's generative AI companion. Ruby simplifies and automates cyber incidents response and recovery by providing clear step-by-step guidance on recovering data from security incidents. So users of all levels of cybersecurity expertise can use these AI capabilities out of the box, which helps organizations scale security operations against cyber attacks without increasing staffing requirements, which we know are really critical today. Ruby's actually powered by Azure OpenAI, and Microsoft has obviously established itself as a huge player in AI. Vamshi, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but is there anything you'd add about generative AI and kind of the ways in which those capabilities are intersecting with data protection today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's super cool to see Rubrik being at the forefront of, using these capabilities and bringing them to our shared customers with, using Azure for OpenAI. And Rubrik Cloud Vault is an awesome product. We love, what our joint customers are saying about it. As you said, that option is fantastic. People love having that secure air-gapped vault in the cloud, with all of the functionality and rich support that Rubrik brings, backed by all of the scale and security and good support from Azure Object Storage. So those are great integrations. In terms of like all of the other things, this just kind of, for me, really, brings home how much we do together as companies partnering now, and all of the different ways in which Rubrik and Azure are working together to secure and protect customer workloads running on Azure. I'll touch on a couple of things that, some of them are recent releases, some of them are upcoming releases that, touch on things that I've been really excited about. I'll start with, we've talked about cyber resilience and all, cyber posture and detection. Rubrik has a fantastic integration with a product called Azure Sentinel that brings together, this huge, set of security signals across your Azure estate and puts them in a single place, in a single sort of pane of glass and dashboard, and helps your security and IT folks to understand and respond well. And Rubrik is well integrated with Sentinel. It's got one of the best integrations in terms of having seamless, easy to use integration with Sentinel. Another area of support is the support for Azure Active Directory, or Entra ID as it's known now. That's really central. Identity and all the credentials and the both user accounts and system accounts are central to a workload and making sure recovery can happen. And Rubrik protects Entra ID data, and it also has a really good support for identity on recovery of different workloads. And even in certain vertical niches that are super critical, Talk about healthcare. Uh, Rubrik and Azure have great support for protection of Epic on Azure. So hospitals are some of the most mission critical, things out there for all of us as a society. And unfortunately, they're just as subject to ransomware attacks. And so Rubrik and Azure coming together to protect Epic on Azure and, patient health records and the ability for patients to go to hospital, for hospitals to run. That I think is an awesome feature that I've been really happy to see us collaborate on. Our support also extends to broad platform pieces. A good example of this is, Rubrik's support for Red Hat OpenShift, as well as, Kubernetes, or Azure Kubernetes Service AKS. Rubrik has good support for these kinds of workloads that are applicable to a broad range of applications and customer workloads. And the last piece I'll touch on is, as we think about cutting edge storage improvements on our platform, we always partner with Rubrik to build that support for those workloads natively into Azure. Good examples are Ultra Disks, which are really high IOPS, low latency disk for mission critical workloads like databases. Rubrik supports those, or will support those soon. Elastic SAN for container and VM workloads. That's a service we've had in public preview. We're going to GA soon. And Rubrik is already working on support for protecting data inside Elastic SAN. And that support is coming soon as well. So I love the partnership we have together. I'm really excited for where we're going. And in terms of the ability for Rubrik to bring that cyber resilience support, as a first-class citizen to Azure.
Absolutely. I'm incredibly grateful for our partnership, both in terms of what we've done together to date and what we'll do together in the future. These capabilities are really critical to helping customers achieve cyber resilience across the most popular Azure services, while, of course, containing cloud spend. So I'll wrap things up for today. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation, Vamshi.
Thank you, Alka. It was really fun to talk about all the things we're doing together.
I'm now excited to speak with Steve Morris, Senior Manager of IT Architecture and Engineering at JELD-WEN. In this discussion, we'll get Steve's take on the challenges of protecting cloud data versus on-prem data, how JELD-WEN thinks about achieving cyber resilience, and why JELD-WEN chose Rubrik to protect their data. Steve, welcome to the session. So excited to talk with you today about cyber resilience and what that means at JELD-WEN. Could you start by telling us a bit about JELD-WEN and your role?
Absolutely, Alka. Thanks for having me today. I'm really happy to be here. JELD-WEN is, we're a manufacturer. We produce windows and doors, and we're the #1 producer of windows and doors globally. Our revenue is about $5 billion, and we have 18,000 employees globally, primarily in North America and Europe. My role at JELD-WEN is in the IT department. So I manage our architecture team, our platform engineering team, and our network engineering team.
Great. So one of the things I was just talking about with Vamshi was how some of the challenges around protecting data on-prem are quite different when you're thinking about a cloud environment. So curious to get your take on this. How are the challenges of protecting cloud data different?
One of the biggest challenges we saw as we moved from on-premise to the cloud is the cloud just doesn't have the same kind of borders or governors that you have with on-premise. So it's hard for on-premise systems to grow as quickly because you have restraints on disk, likewise for like databases, server compute. In the cloud, you can expand it elastically as quickly as you can press a few buttons. So you lose visibility and there tends to be a little bit more sprawl. So a lot of our focus is around governance, making sure that we're keeping our arms as an IT group around the growth, as well as how data is being stored and used within the cloud.
That makes a lot of sense. One of the things we were talking about today is cyber resilience, and was just curious to hear how you define cyber resilience.
Well, I guess I would say, like throughout my career, cybersecurity has always been a big focus. But I feel like until the last 5 years, a lot of the focus was around kind of detection and prevention with antivirus tools, intrusion prevention, things of that nature. But now in the last 5 years particularly, I think in addition to detection and prevention, we've really begun to focus more on sort of response. Like, what do you do if you have the unfortunate event of a threat actor compromising your environment and inserting malware or ransomware or some other type of threat? So once it's been compromised, okay, now we move in. How do we respond? How do we recover? And that's been a big focus, I think, and sort of a shift in my mind in the way you think of cyber resilience, where you really have to now plan for that contingency if you can't prevent the threat.
Can you talk a little bit about how JELD-WEN approaches being cyber resilient? What are the kind of strategies or capabilities that you have in place to kind of achieve what you've just talked about?
Sure. So one of the things we identified in our cyber roadmap was a gap around our backup and recovery. So our backup and recovery was, like a lot of companies, I think, traditionally built on operational recovery. So you have a disk failure, you have a hardware failure. Maybe during a upgrade, you need to roll back. So you were really focused on a lot of those operational challenges. Recently, though, we wanted to focus on what happens if we get ransomware. How do we recover from that? What if the backups get infected? How do we prevent backups from being infected? So that was one of the things that sort of led us to begin considering an overhaul of our global enterprise backup strategy and really led us to Rubrik.
Great. And I'd love to hear more about that. How did you choose Rubrik?
So we went through a pretty robust review process. We looked at Gartner. We wanted to take something from the top quadrant, someone who was kind of a visionary and really driving like a forward-looking view of backups. So as we narrowed down to our short list, we already had Rubrik in place for our Office 365 backups. We determined that the out-of-the-box recovery of 30 days for Office 365 really wasn't sufficient because we were depending more and more on OneDrive and SharePoint and Outlook, and it didn't really make sense for us not to be able to recover that data or archive it in the same way we treat all of our other data. So Rubrik kind of our first entry into Rubrik was with that platform, but we were really happy with the interface. I remember working with the person who was responsible for that project from the architecture side, and we were all kind of really happy with how the interface played out, how quickly we could learn it. I think I felt like I picked it up in just about an hour, like just kind of going through. Everything was very intuitive. So we knew we wanted to include Rubrik in our evaluation for enterprise backup. There were some really strong competitors in the space, and as we went through the exercise to evaluate, we found that a lot of the capabilities were similar, but there were two things for Rubrik I thought that really stood out and sort of led us to make that decision. The first was the partnership with Microsoft. We have a lot of investment, a lot of our assets within Azure, and we have a good partnership with them, and we see them as a big part of our forward infrastructure plan. The second piece, though, was really around the cyber focus for Rubrik. So unlike some of the other competitors, Rubrik had a very, very strong focus on cyber, not just in the capabilities in the tool today, but in the roadmap. So it was important for us to select a partner that was going to give immutable backups, that was going to give us the ability to recover and detect ransomware. And Rubrik checked all those boxes, and it was a differentiator with compared to some of the other products we were considering.
Thanks for sharing that, Steve. You know, I hear similar themes from our customers who find Rubrik's intuitive interface, single pane of glass across the entire data estate, and focus on both prevention and response to be critical drivers of their decision to go with Rubrik. I have one last question for you, Steve. I'm curious, as you reflect back on your time at JELD-WEN in this leadership role, what have some of the key learnings been, and what would you advise others in your shoes to think about now?
From the cyber program, I think we identified a lot of areas we needed to focus. We had a lot of opportunities, and it was really important for us to prioritize those, but we wanted to get everything kind of done at once, right? You really want to kind of drive transformative change, but it was just too much to do. So we really started to get more traction when we prioritized and set out a program and said, okay, these are some of the things that are the most important for us for our security posture that we want to focus on for part of our zero trust strategy. And initially, like Rubrik was right at the top of the list for that implementation because it was helping us with both our enterprise business continuity, as well as cyber. And then there were additional components that we layered on after that. I think we would have loved to have been able to go faster and do more, but it was just too much to consume at once. So by having the program, that's what really helped drive our progress along the Zero Trust roadmap.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Steve, for your partnership. And thank you to everyone for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Incredible. I love this kind of picking the brains of experts style chat that we got to have here with Alka, Vamshi, and Steve. Huge thank you for sharing all of your insights, all of your knowledge there. And I want to remind all of you to follow up on this conversation. Visit that handouts tab section so you can get some great resources and follow-ups in there. Essentially, if you click, you'll get started with Rubrik, where you'll be able to see their whole resource center. It's just a click away. Tons of great articles, case studies like you kind of got today, as well as links to also take a free trial and dive in. Check it out for yourself. And with that, before we wrap up, we have one more little bit of fun to add to an already awesome webinar. It's time for a prize giveaway. A reminder, you must be present at the webinar in order to win. And without further ado, today's winner of a $250 Amazon gift card is Alexander Seppa from Michigan. Congratulations, Alexander. As always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after the webinar today. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Rubrik, Microsoft Azure, and Geldwin for making this webinar possible, and especially to our incredible speakers who have given us so much to think about today. And hey, sending high fives and special thank yous to all of you with us here today for making this possible as well. I know sometimes it can be difficult to stop and lift our heads up from the day-to-day of it all. And cyber resiliency planning is not only looking up and out, it's planning for something you hope never happens. So that is not always easy to make mental space for in your day. But today, you all took that step towards improved cyber resiliency, and I'm so happy that we could be a part of that with you here today. I know I have learned a ton from this session, and I hope you all have as well. And I can't wait to see you all at another webinar again soon. And until then, I hope you have an absolutely magical rest of your day and fantastic weekend, everybody. Take care.